The Girls Hostel Nightmare. The first scream tore through the silent halls of St. Agnes Girls Hostel at exactly 3:17 a.m. Priya jolted awake, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped animal. The digital clock's red numbers burned into the darkness. 3:17. The same cursed time Priya had disappeared last week. Across the room, Sneha's bed stood empty, the sheets tangled and damp with sweat. A metallic scent hung in the air, thick and coppery, making Priya's stomach churn. She opened her mouth to call out, but the sound died in her throat as a wet, dragging noise echoed from the hallway, something heavy being pulled across the cracked linoleum tiles. 3 nights ago, Riya had shaken Priya awake, her fingers digging into Priya's arm hard enough to leave crescent-shaped bruises. "There's someone in our room," Riya had whispered, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Priya had brushed her off, blaming it on stress or nightmares, until the giggling started. A high-pitched, childlike sound that seemed to come from under the bed. The next morning, Riya was gone. The warden had dismissed it, muttering about rebellious girls and secret boyfriends, but Priya knew better. She'd seen the deep scratches on the wall above Riya's bed, the dark clumps of hair caught in the splintered wood, and the words smeared in something sticky and red on the mirror. "They're buried in the walls." Ananya had been next. She'd burst into Priya's room 2 nights later, her usually neat braid unraveling, her lips cracked from biting back screams. "I saw her in the bathroom mirror," Ananya had panted, her pupils blown wide with terror. "She was standing behind me, but when I turned around, her voice broke." The next morning, Ananya's bed was empty, but her phone lay on the pillow, still recording. The video showed Ananya sleeping peacefully until the blankets began to move on their own. Then the thing emerged, a skeletal hand, its fingers too long, the nails blackened and broken, wrapping around Ananya's ankle. The screen went dark just as a face filled the frame. Hollow eye sockets, skin stretched tight over bone, and a grin that split from ear to ear. Priya and Jia had broken into the warden's office last night, their hands shaking as they picked the rusted lock on the filing cabinet. Inside, they found the ledger, pages upon pages of names, dates, and room numbers, all written in the same cramped handwriting. Every entry shared 2 things: room 13B and October 31st. The most recent entry sent ice sliding down Priya's spine. Riya Mera, room 4, October 31st, 2023. Status: taken. At the bottom of the page, in faded ink, someone had scrawled, 7 more, and the door opens. Now, as Priya stood frozen in the middle of her room, Sneha's absence screamed at her louder than any noise ever could. Her phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with another message from the unknown number. "She's coming up the stairs." The hallway outside creaked, the sound of weight pressing down on old wood. Something scratched at the door, long, slow drags of nails against peeling paint. Priya's breath came in shallow gasps as the scratching turned to pounding, each thud shaking the frame. Then silence. A choked sob built in Priya's throat, but before it could escape, a whisper slithered through the gap under the door. "You shouldn't have looked." The lights flickered once, twice, and went out. In the darkness, Priya felt it, the warm drip of something wet landing on her shoulder. She didn't need to look up to know what was clinging to the ceiling above her. The wet drip slid down Priya's arm as she stood frozen in the suffocating dark. Her lungs burned from holding her breath, but the fear was a living thing wrapped around her throat, squeezing tighter with every second. Above her, the ceiling creaked, something heavy shifting in the shadows. A low, wet chuckle echoed through the room, so close it could have been whispered directly into her ear. Priya's fingers found the edge of her desk, nails digging into the wood as she fought the urge to scream. Then the lights flickered back on. The room was empty, but the door she had locked, was now wide open. A trail of glistening footprints led out into the hallway, each one sinking deeper into the wood, as if whatever made them was impossibly heavy. The air smelled like rotting meat and damp earth, the scent so thick Priya could taste it on her tongue. Her phone buzzed violently against her thigh, making her flinch. The screen showed a new message, this time from Riya's number, a number that had been disconnected for days. "She knows you looked. Now she's hungry." Priya's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. A noise from the hallway snapped her head up, a soft, rhythmic thud, like something being dragged. She knew she should run, hide, do anything but stand there, but her legs refused to move. Then, a whisper slithered through the open door, the voice a grotesque mimicry of Riya's. "Priya, come out, Priya. We miss you." The words were wrong. Too many syllables, the vowels stretched and distorted. Something moved at the end of the hallway. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the flickering emergency light. too tall, too thin. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, the neck bent like a broken doll's. Priya's breath hitched. It was wearing Riya's favorite blue nightshirt, the one she'd been wearing the night she disappeared. But the thing inside it wasn't Riya. Not anymore. Took a step forward, then another. Its bare feet left blackened, smoldering prints on the floor. Priya finally found her voice. She screamed. The sound seemed to startle the thing. It jerked, its two long fingers twitching. Then, with a sound like cracking bone, its head snapped upright and it charged. Priya slammed the door shut just as the thing crashed into it, the wood splintering under the impact. Something warm and sticky seeped through the cracks. Blood, thick and dark. The thing on the other side let out a guttural snarl, then began to laugh, the sound wet and choking. "You can't hide, little moth," it crooned. "The walls have ears, the floors have eyes, and we are so hungry." Priya stumbled back, her legs giving out as she collapsed against her bed. The door shuddered again, the hinges screaming in protest. She had maybe seconds before it gave way. Then she saw it, a loose floorboard near her desk, one she'd never noticed before, and beneath it, a hollow space, and inside that space, a diary. Not hers, not Riya's. The name on the cover was written in faded, shaky letters. Mira, Room 13B. The door exploded inward. The door shattered inward with a deafening crack, spraying splinters like shrapnel across the room. Priya barely had time to snatch the diary before scrambling backward, her back slamming against the wall. The thing that had been wearing Riya's face staggered into the room, its limbs jerking like a marionette with half its strings cut. Up close, the details were worse. Its skin was gray and peeling, stretched too tight over bones that jutted at unnatural angles. Its mouth split open in a grin that showed too many teeth, each one filed to a sharp point. "Found you," it hissed. Priya's fingers tightened around the diary. The thing lunged. She rolled sideways, feeling the rush of air as its claws gouged deep furrows into the wall where her head had been. The stench of decay rolled off it in waves, thick enough to make her gag. Priya didn't think. She bolted, diving through the shattered remains of the door and into the hallway. Behind her, the thing let out a shriek of rage, the sound reverberating through the walls like a dozen voices screaming at once. The hallway stretched endlessly, the flickering lights casting monstrous shadows that seemed to reach for her. Priya's bare feet slapped against the cold floor as she ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't dare look back. Room 13B loomed at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Priya skidded to a stop. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to run the other way, but the diary in her hands burned like a brand. Whatever was happening, whatever thing was hunting them, the answers were in that room. She pushed the door open. The air inside was thick with the smell of mildew and something fouler. Old blood, maybe, or rotting flesh. The room was small, barely larger than a closet, with peeling wallpaper and a single rusted bed frame pushed against the far wall. But it was the writing that made Priya's blood run cold. Every inch of the walls was covered in frantic, overlapping scrawls, some in ink, some in what looked like dried blood. The same phrase, repeated hundreds of times. "They're buried in the walls." Priya's hands shook as she opened the diary. The first page was dated October 31st, 2003. "They told us room 13B was sealed because of black mold," Mira had written. "But I saw the warden dragging something inside last night. Something wrapped in plastic. It was moving. I think." The rest of the entry was scratched out violently. Priya flipped to the next page. "They're watching me. I hear them whispering at night, begging to be let out. The warden says I'm imagining things, but I saw her in the mirror this morning. She was standing behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one there. Just the smell of wet earth and rotting flowers." A noise from the hallway snapped Priya's head up. Something was dragging itself closer. She turned to the last entry, the ink smeared as if by tears. "I know what they're doing. Every 5 years, they choose 7 girls. They take them to the basement. The page was torn. Priya's breath caught. The dragging sound was right outside the door now. Then, a whisper. "Mira, we found your diary." The door creaked open. The door groaned as it swung open, revealing a darkness so thick it seemed to swallow the flickering hallway lights. Priya's breath came in shallow gasps as she pressed herself against the far wall of room 13B, the diary clutched to her chest like a shield. The smell hit her first, damp earth and copper, the metallic tang of blood so fresh she could taste it on her tongue. Then came the sound, a wet, rhythmic squelching, like something being pulled through mud. A hand appeared in the doorway. Not Riaz. Not anymore. The fingers were too long, the nails blackened and cracked, the skin mottled with bruises that bloomed purple and green in the dim light. It gripped the door frame, tendons snapping as it hauled itself forward. The thing that had once been Riaz lurched into the room, its head lolling at an unnatural angle, its jaw unhinged with a sickening pop, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth. Mira kept secrets. It rasped, each word punctuated by the sound of something tearing in its throat. Priya's back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to run. Then the floor gave way beneath her. With a splintering crack, the rotten wood collapsed, sending Priya tumbling into the darkness below. She landed hard on her side, pain shooting up her ribs as she skidded across cold concrete. The diary flew from her grasp, its pages fluttering open as it slid into a pool of stagnant water. She was in the basement. The air was thick with the stench of decay, so overpowering Priya nearly retched. The only light came from a single flickering bulb overhead, casting long shadows across the stained concrete floor. The walls were covered in the same frantic writing as room 13B, but here, the words were carved deep into the stone. 7 girls, 7 years. The door stays shut. A choked sob escaped Priya's lips as her eyes adjusted to the gloom. The basement wasn't empty. 6 figures stood in a perfect circle, their backs to her. They were unnaturally still, their heads bowed, their arms limp at their sides. Priya recognized Riya's blue nightshirt, Ananya's favorite scarf, Sneha's distinctive braid, but the things wearing their skins were wrong. Their limbs twitched and jerked, their bones cracking as they moved in unison, like puppets controlled by the same invisible strings. At the center of the circle lay a 7th shape, a girl, her wrists and ankles bound with rusted chains. Her face was turned away, but Priya knew. Mira, the thing that had been Riya, dropped from the ceiling, landing in a crouch beside Priya. Its breath was cold against her ear as it whispered, "You're the 7th little moth. The last sacrifice. The door will finally open." Behind them, the circle of girls began to chant. The chanting rose in a guttural crescendo, the voices of the 6 possessed girls twisting together into something inhuman. The basement walls trembled, dust shaking loose from the ceiling as the concrete beneath Priya's palms grew unnaturally warm. Mira's body jerked violently against her chains. Then her head snapped up. Her eyes were gone. Only black voids remained, leaking thick, tar-like tears down her sunken cheeks. But her lips parted, and when she spoke, it was with a chorus of voices, layered and dissonant. "You should have opened the door when you had the chance." The thing wearing Riya's skin seized Priya by the hair, dragging her toward the circle. Its fingers burned like dry ice against her scalp. Priya thrashed, nails scraping against the concrete, but the creature's strength was impossible. The chanting grew louder. The air itself seemed to vibrate. And then, a sound like 1,000 doors slamming shut at once. The circle of girls collapsed, their bodies hitting the ground with wet thuds. The thing holding Priya let out an ear-splitting shriek, its grip faltering just enough for Priya to wrench free. She stumbled backward, her pulse roaring in her ears as she took in the scene before her. The basement was changing. The walls bulged inward, the concrete splitting like overripe fruit. From the cracks oozed a thick, black substance that moved with purpose, slithering across the floor toward the center of the room, toward Mira. Mira's head lolled to the side, her mouth stretching into a grin too wide for her face. "Too late," she whispered. The black tendrils surged forward, wrapping around her emaciated body. The chains holding her down shattered as she rose into the air, suspended by the writhing darkness. Her limbs twisted, bones snapping and reforming at impossible angles. And then, the door, a massive, rusted thing that hadn't been there a second ago, embedded in the far wall. Its surface was etched with symbols that made Priya's eyes ache to look at. The knob turned slowly, screeching as it moved. Something was coming through. Priya didn't wait to see what. She lunged for the diary, still lying in the stagnant water. The pages were damp, the ink bleeding, but one phrase remained legible. "Salt and iron. Shatter the circle. Salt, iron." Priya's hand flew to her pocket, the iron nail she'd taken from the warden's office days ago, the one she'd kept as a lucky charm. And the salt. Her eyes darted to the broken salt line near the stairs, the one she hadn't noticed before. She scrambled forward, ignoring the way the floor trembled beneath her. The door was nearly open now, a sliver of blinding white light spilling through the gap. The thing that had been Mira let out a howl of triumph. Priya didn't think. She drove the iron nail into the black mass surrounding Mira. The reaction was instantaneous. The darkness recoiled, shrieking. The door slammed shut with a force that shook the entire building. Mira's body hit the ground with a sickening crunch, the unnatural light in her eyes flickering out. Silence. Then, a gasp. Priya sat up, coughing violently. Around her, the other girls stirred, their eyes clearing of the black haze that had clouded them. The door was gone. The basement was just a basement again. But as Priya helped Priya to her feet, she caught a glimpse of something in the corner. A shadow, darker than the rest, watching. And then it was gone. The police found the warden's body in room 13B the next morning. Her skin was covered in the same symbols that had been etched into the door. Priya and the others were questioned, but their stories didn't add up. How could they? The official report called it a mass hallucination. But Priya knew better, because sometimes late at night she still hears it, the scratching at her door, the whisper of her name, and the faint, echoing creak of a door opening somewhere far below.